I want you to consider this because I'm going to tell a few stories. This is not just going to be a message on Mark 6 because I like to tell stories. But picture the scenario. The disciples have just seen amazing miracle. They've just seen Jesus multiply from 5 loaves and 2 fish. Is it 5 loaves, 2 fish? I think that's the way it is. 5,000 people filled. And then they collect the baskets. They get all the baskets together. 12 baskets full. They've seen an amazing provision. Now, Jesus is telling them to go in the boat, we're going to the other side, and I'm going to the mountain to pray. The disciples have just seen his faithfulness in the storm. Now they're going to see something else. They're going to see God's provision through the trial. They've seen his faithfulness and provision. I want to consider something. When we go through storms, there's a couple of things that we need to keep in mind. A few truths from Scripture that I hear. And the first one, if I could say these are truths to keep our soul anchored when you're going through the storm. And the first one is very important. It says in verse 45, and immediately Jesus made his disciples get on the boat and go ahead of him to the other side. I like that. The Lord allowed the storm to happen. Don't you like that? He sent them ahead. And one thing is very important. Sometimes when we're in the storm, we kind of try to figure out, Lord, what's happening in my life? Am I out of your will? No, you can be in the will of God and in the storm. And Jesus kind of sent them to the other side for a purpose. And I like what was happening. Here are the disciples. They are excited. They've just had a great revival. 5,000 people fed. I'm sure they were preached to. They're getting back. They're in the boat. Please understand that in the boat, they actually possibly have the baskets of loaves and 12 baskets on the boat. And they kind of like enjoying this miracle. And they're thinking to themselves, wow, we saw an incredible miracle. But they forgot the miracle. They were in the boat in the storms. They didn't understand. I heard if you go to the Sea of Galilee, 13 miles wide, 8 miles in length, and different kinds of things, that most mornings it's like a sheet of glass. But because of the mountains around, it's very easy for storm winds to come in the night seasons. And suddenly the wind blows and the waves kind of get choppy. Here are the disciples never expecting the storm. And here they were in the middle of that boat, and suddenly the wind hits. Have you been there? I think we all have. They were tired. They were exhausted. They were exhilarated when the storm hit. And I want to tell you a story of why God allowed that to happen. He sent them there. And I want to tell you a story of something victorious that actually happened in one of our states. And it's a personal story of how God taught me something in the middle of a storm. Many years ago, we were preaching in a state called Orissa. Now, Orissa, let me give you a background here. Orissa is about 60 million people. Most of the people in Orissa live in forest areas, jungles. They are tribal people. And God is working in the state of Orissa. I heard in the last 10 years, 100,000 people turned to the Lord. Well, the devil didn't like it. And if you know all the persecution that's happened in Orissa, 12 years ago, an Australian missionary was burned to death. This is not happening all over India. This is this particular state the enemy was trying to get into and trying to stop Christian work. About 6 months ago, 600 Christians were martyred in the state of Orissa. Well, when we were going on this mission trip, 5 of us, 3 pastors and 2 missionaries, there was no problem. We went down. We actually visited where the missionary was, and we were having a wonderful time. We were preaching open air, showing sketchboard. 5 days that happened, everything was great. We were on our way back home, and in the last village where we were preaching, a big crowd gathered. People were listening very intently. 2 people came up that were anti-Christian fundamentalists. They came into the crowd, and I could hear them whispering, and within a short time, we found ourselves in the middle of a mob. That they had turned the whole mob, and we were surrounded. And long story short, we were taken to the police station. We were arrested, and we were put in a night lockup, and then we were entered into a district jail. And I found myself, I'd never been in jail before, and I kind of found myself, this is interesting. And 5 of us were there, and, there was about 600 inmates in this jail. And for the next 7 days, we found ourselves in an Indian jail. Now, an Indian jail is different from an American jail. I went with Pastor Mike Daigle into one of the American jails, and I thought to myself, oh my God, they have television, you have haircuts, you've got gymnasiums. If you have jails like that in India, no one will want to stay on the streets. They'll all want to go to jail. But we're there on this jail, and that was kind of interesting. You slept for those days. You slept on the floor, dirty floors. The next morning we woke up. I said, I don't have a toothbrush. We're just arrested the way we were, and they said, you don't need a toothbrush here. Here's a twig. You bend the twig and you brush your teeth with it. And the bathroom was, I won't even tell you what the bathroom was like. And I won't even tell you what it was like. We were drawing water from the well. The food was, I lost 5 kgs in 7 days. But in the middle of that, the storm was not so much for us. The storm was for my wife. The storm was for our church back home. People were praying. But 15 people got saved in that jail. And you know what happened in that jail? We learned why God allowed the storm. There's one thing else I want you to notice. When Jesus sent them in the storm, where was he? He was in the mountain. And what was he doing? Let's say it together. He was praying. And I don't know about you, but I want to tell you something. He was praying for his own. Part of our training in life is not just Bible school. Part of our training in life is learning to trust him in the storm. Getting closer to him. Stormy winds fulfilling his purpose. He was praying for them. I can imagine from the mountains around Galilee, Jesus saw everything. He saw the boat being tossed. He saw the disciples. He saw the aching. And I'm sure for just a moment, have you been through storms and the first thing you lose is perspective? And you don't even think, sometimes you're so in the middle of the storm, you just think, and I think the disciples probably says, where's Jesus? And then just turn back to beating the waves. But Jesus was there. And they couldn't see him, but he could see them. You know what he was doing? He was praying for them. You know what he was praying for? He was not praying that they would get out of the storm. He was praying that their faith would not fail. And that when they were strong, they could tell other people how to walk in a storm. That's what God is trying to do with you. Maybe you came here today and maybe you're struggling. Maybe it's your marriage. And you're saying, God, I need you. Where are you? And you're struggling with the O's and you're tired and exhausted. But maybe God tonight wants you to know that he's praying for you. I'll give you another promise. It says he's able to save. He's able to deliver to the uttermost anyone who draws near to him, seeing that he ever lives to make intercession for you. And what a beautiful promise that is, that in that storm, all you need to do is draw near. And I don't know how he's going to solve it, but he is. He's going to work through situations. He's going to work through finances. But he just says, draw near. Just draw near to me. For I ever live to, what? Make intercession for you. I am praying for you. Charles Spurgeon used to say, if you could only hear Jesus praying in the next room, and you could open the door and hear how he's praying for you, you would not fear 1,000 enemies. If you could only see Jesus through a keyhole one moment and see his glory in heaven as he's praying before the Father, you would not fear 1,000 enemies. And I know that when we were in the prison, my wife was praying, the church was praying, and we had people praying. And sometimes we go and we say, Lord, please put me, would you pray for me? Would you pray for me on your prayer list? And you know what? I love that. But I want you to never forget, in the middle of the storm, Jesus will always pray for you. He's always praying for you. And He ever lives to intercede for you, to take you from the uttermost to deliver you to the uttermost. I like it. I sometimes say guttermost to the uttermost. Jonah was in the belly of the whale when he cried. And when we cry unto the Lord, read Psalm 107. It says they cried unto the Lord in the storms and He heard them. He cried unto the Lord again and He heard them. You cry unto Him and He will help you. Because that's what He wanted to do with your life. So He was praying for them.